then we have the second panelist, Sam from Ecocert. He's the regional director of Asia-Pacific region. And then may I invite Audrey, founder and sustainability consultant and thought partner Eco. And then may I invite the last panelist, Roberta, associate director from BSR.
Thank you, Sammy. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I mean, I know you've been here for a couple of hours already. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for our panelists for joining us and sharing your insights on this important topic we will discuss today, which is the role of businesses and consumers for sustainability and climate justice. Of course, it's an interesting topic. We know how difficult it is to transition to a low carbon economy, and we need the help of all stakeholders, from businesses to consumers to governments, NGOs, everyone. But for this session, we'll focus on businesses and consumers, and we'll try to understand what's the role of each one of them, what's each one of us responsibility, either as an individual or either as a part of a company. What are the challenges, what are the opportunities? So I hope you'll enjoy this session. We will have a panelist discussion of around 25 minutes, and after that we have the Q&A session. So please do use the tool to send your questions. Don't wait till the last minute. You still have time, of course, at the end, but please do ask your questions. And there is also, maybe at the end, a QR code session where you can see the takeaways with the AI tool that gives the takeaways for you. Okay, before we start our panelists' discussion, I would like just to let our panelists quickly introduce themselves, maybe share a bit about their background and their experience, anything related to the topic we have today. Maybe we can start on the woman first, yes, with Roberta.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Hear me? Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Roberta Pinamonti. I'm Associate Director BSR, as I don't know if you can guess from my name, I'm Italian originally, and from my accent, probably. So I work for BSR. BSR is a membership-based organization. Normally our comms team doesn't like saying business for social responsibility, but that's actually our acronym, how we were born. So really from this title, you can see a lot of the work that we do is on social aspects, so the S of the ESG work. Headquartered in the US, but we have offices around the world, including here in Asia, here in Singapore. We have a team of 5 mighty individuals here working with companies on, again, ESG topics. As part of my role at BSR, I've been working with many companies on social, and when I say social, I really literally mean human rights. I know sometimes it's a debated term, depending where you are from, but that's what we do. So we do support companies on getting on their human rights working with suppliers on labor practices, labor standards, and integrating human rights and social issues as part of their sustainability agenda. When you think about sustainability as a really ESG term, not just climate. And we have also been exploring the topic of climate justice, which is very on top of the agenda for transition and a fair transition for everyone. So that's it. Feel free to come after this session if you want to ask any question about my organization, about myself, or anything you'll be interested to discuss.
Thank you, Roberta. Audrey?
Okay, this is pretty loud. My name is Audrey, and I run Thought Partner Eco, which is a sustainability consultancy focusing on employee engagement, sustainability strategies, and communication. So my background was in the creative industry, and I used to help brands strategize ways to tell their stories in visually engaging ways that's easy to understand. So now I use these skills on sustainability instead. So helping companies strategize what is best to do in terms of sustainability, in terms of their impact, internal operations, external operations, and also how to communicate their efforts in an authentic way that is not greenwashing. And I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Audrey.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Sam Chauffaille. I've been in Singapore for 17 years, and for the last 2 years, I've been running Ecocert for Asia-Pacific region. Ecocert is a French company that started around 40 years ago, and they were the company that designed the first standards for organic agriculture back then, and then expanding into organic cosmetic, organic textile, and over the last decade, also focusing a lot on sustainability, environment, and social aspect. So our role is really to certify companies and product that their systems are meeting the standards for organic and sustainability. And I've been involved in many sustainability projects in Singapore for the last 10 years. The reason being, I'm also a father of 3 kids. I have my daughter with me today here, who joined me. And I think as a parent, and we're going to talk about that later when discuss consumers, as parents, it's also very important to make sure we leave the world in a better place for the next generation. So that's also one of the key drivers for me to be involved in sustainability, and very happy to be part of the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Great, we have such an amazing group of panelists and very diverse. So I will start with the first question, with the first topic actually that we have. And for a bit of context, 75% of Singaporean consumers want more sustainable action, but a third feel competing sustainability claims stir confusion, resulting in mistrust in brands. And I think this one comes from a WWF report. So how can companies address this gap to become a trusted brand, right? What are the main constraints, challenges, but also opportunities for brands? And I'd like to start with Audrey, as you have your background maybe on communication, and you did highlight it on greenwashing, right? From your perspective, what could maybe businesses do?
So I think it's important to identify where the mistrust comes from. Like, what is the reason for the mistrust? Is it the competing claims are confusing, you don't understand what it means, or other reasons? So I think it's important to identify that. And as businesses, I feel like the most simple, straightforward thing that you can start doing is to only put out claims that you can substantiate. So don't say like, oh, we are eco-friendly, or vague terms like that. You need to say why and in what way, and in a way to guide consumers to understand what you're trying to say and what this term means. And for consumers, I feel like we also have a part to play if we don't understand certain things that a brand puts out. If it's confusing, you can always feedback to the brand. You can always ask questions. You can always engage. So the engagement has to come from both sides, from the brands to the individuals, and from the individuals to the brands. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. To build trust, Sam, do you think that, you know, from your expertise on eco certifications and labels, do you think this could help to build trust? But also, we know there are like so many already labels and certifications out there for products. How can the consumer choose which one could we trust?
And before I answer the question, I just want to reinforce the fact that 70% of the Singaporean wants to buy more sustainable products and services. I think that's the great positive stats in there. Talking about certification, I think it's a complex topic, but the fact that a company wants to certify a product or service, I think substantiate their claim, because a certification, you have generally an audit taking place, you have inspectors coming on your site, on your factory, in the case of agriculture, coming to your farm, on your processing setup. So that's a big commitment. There is a cost associated, and I will say certification is certainly the most tangible aspect of your claim. Now the reality is, there is not one standard for everything. Sustainability is a massive topic, as we know, ESG, and under each of those letters, there are so many topics to be addressed, so there is not one single standard. So if you think about it, you can have an organic product, organic food, no chemicals, no pesticide, fantastic for health. We can certify the product that, as being organic. But maybe there was modern slavery to do the harvest. Maybe an 8-year-old child was the one picking up the cocoa. So then you have to go for standard that will address fair wages, child labor, fair trade, and so on. That will not impact deforestation. So then you need to get a certificate for deforestation. And this is the real reality of the world today. And that's why we as consumers can be confused, because there are so many. But each of them are good. And each of them address one specific topic. Again, there is no magic bullet here, not one size fits all. So when I would say as a consumer, the more label or standard or stamps you see on the packaging, I think the better the product is for the environment, for the social aspect. That's where we are today. And just to comment, to finish on that topic, I think something very important when we talk about greenwashing, the EU is putting a directive starting enforcing next year, 2025, around greenwashing. So every claim on a product, on a packaging entering the EU market, as a company, you will have to demonstrate and you will have to defend your position. So you have to show and to explain why you make that, carbon neutral or eco-friendly or, planet-friendly, whatever. Before you make the claim, you're going to have to prove it. And I think that's also going to change the mentality and the mindset and, bring up the trust from the consumer around those type of claims.
Can I just jump in? Because you mentioned the EU regulations, there is actually a checklist online that you can find from the EU saying like what kind of words that's not allowed anymore, especially the vague ones like eco-friendly, conscious, or things that are supposed to sound like they mean something, but when you are asked to explain it, you can't really, so that's not allowed anymore in the EU. I hope that brands in Singapore also take a leaf out of that and try to build better practices.
Yeah, that's very valuable insights. Thank you. And I think, yes, any company could use that checklist to see and maybe analyze what are the current practices. As often it happens, once a compliance starts somewhere, it's just a matter of years till it spreads across the globe. Right? So it's good for companies to know. Thank you. Maybe we can broaden also a bit the discussion, and Roberta, with your background in supply chain and in human rights, maybe you can give us also a broader view of the other stakeholders, right? That could also pressure maybe companies on being more sustainable.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I think the tagline for me is that consumers are not alone. There is of course a lot of pressure on. Sometimes I feel it's a little unfair pressure only on consumers, like to expect to buy ethical products, to expect to buy, organic or whatever. There are of course very good reasons to do so, but I don't think consumers are the only actors, and they shouldn't be the only ones that we point to for, increasing their expectations. Also because sometimes these certified products or, organic products or whatever products, for different reasons, are more expensive. So we cannot necessarily expect that consumer pressure is the only solution for pressuring companies on their practices. Other levers definitely that we see in our work are regulation. It was mentioned, like once there is regulation somewhere in the world, it kind of trickles down through different ways, including supply chain. And with supply chain is, every company is, could be a buyer or could be a supplier. So as a supplier, many companies receive requests and demands from their buyers to whom they are selling products or selling services to attain certain standards, which could be environmental practices, but also a lot of companies nowadays are also focusing on social compliance, so labor practices at operations, activities, and so on. So this is another pressure levers that can be enforced on companies. And then investors, also investors are very relevant. Banks that are providing loans to companies are more and more integrating ESG into their evaluation systems. Financial products that are labeled ESG, well, sometimes we could question transparency there, but there is a market also for ESG products and likely demand also for ESG products where investors are aware and conscious that they have that choice to choose such products when they do the investment decisions. And then civil society organizations, of course, well, depending on, the how lively civil society organizations are, how allowed they are sometimes to speak up, because it doesn't necessarily mean that everywhere in the world, freedom of speech necessarily is the same as in all countries in the world, but still civil society organizations are very active and also very, pressuring on companies to act and to, keep up with their performance and, improve their performance. So again, it's an ecosystem of stakeholders, not just consumers. Of course, consumers are very important. But there are also other actors. And I mean, my background before BSR was working for an electric utility company. Would you say that if you are buying electricity, you're necessarily a very active consumer of how good that electricity megawatt or whatever it is produced? Maybe not that much as any other consumer-facing sectors, but still there are these other actors that can influence and can support like improvement in the company's practices. So yeah, so B2B is also an actor there. It's also facing pressures, not just for consumers.
Thank you. Sometimes it's like a chess play, everyone, so many different stakeholders playing the sustainability game, multi-layers.
Multi-layer also, because if you are a consumer, but also you may invest. Singaporeans are very financial savvy. They invest, they take many financial decisions, they invest a lot for their future, for their pension, for whatever that is in their, to make sure their livelihood is kept, and is they can sustain themselves. So that's part of their role. So to look for ESG positive products, whatever that means. And that's another label that does not exist, but could be another pressure.
Okay. Thank you, Roberta. I'd like to go to the next topic, which is decarbonization versus social impact. So in the last few years, most companies, at least large companies, focus a lot of their attentions on decarbonization action, net zero, how to reduce emissions. And rightfully so, we know it's very important. However, the question here is because companies spend more time and effort on decarbonization that they forget about the S, that they forget about social impact, or, what's your stand on it? What do you... Are businesses, are consumers aware also of the human consequences of climate change? Right? If you think of it, maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, I can give you a direct example that unfortunately I witnessed a couple of months ago. I was on the field in Kampot. For those who know, it's a beautiful region south of Cambodia, and they do an amazing pepper. One of the best pepper in the world, and you need 60 liters of water per week per pepper tree. For 18 months now, there has been a drought, so there is absolutely no single water. 80% of the pepper trees from Kampot, again one of the best pepper in the world, has simply disappeared. This is tree that will not come back next year. This is over 80% of all the plantations have been suffering from massive drought. What it means is thousands of farmers and their families have no more job, no more source of revenue. That's the only thing they have. I mean, we're talking about Cambodia, which is unfortunately not a highly developed economy, and we're talking about the countryside of Cambodia. So those people have nothing but their pepper trees, and this is gone. So what it means is thousands of families are going to have to leave their field, their farms, certainly migrate into the city. Some of the kids, eventually the girls are going to end up in bad places, unfortunately. Parents might be working into some of the textile factories, sweatshops, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and all of this has a social impact. So that climate change is a direct relation of, the lack of justice. I think that's because those people have nothing left, and they're going to end up into poverty, a very hard working condition. And going back to the textile, we know unfortunately in this region, in this part of the world, unfortunately, there's still a lot of modern slavery. Textile and the garment industry is still one area where there is unfortunately a tremendous amount of modern slavery. And those farmers are become easy target, for those brand owners. And as a consumer, again, I understand we don't want to put the pressure on the consumer, but at the end, I think we have the right and the power to change a lot of things. But should we buy a T-shirt at $5? That's the debate I have with my daughters all the time. If the T-shirt at $5, something is in the chain of production, there is something that has been missing, and certainly the salary of the people behind it. The price of the textile, the price of the cotton or the commodity is one thing, but it's certainly one element that has totally been skipped out. So again, as a consumer, there is the climate change, there's the climate justice, and in our purchasing decision, there is that social component that sometimes we tend to forget. Well, it's great, I can have very cheap clothes, I can change often, but behind the scene, it means potentially kids working, family being destroyed and split around and working 7 days a week, passport, they don't have any passport, but paper being taken away from them, very harsh condition. That's what it means. A $5 T-shirt, this is what it means behind the scene. And we don't see that enough. Again, we are in this day-to-day life, and we're like changing clothes, beautiful fashion. That's fine, but that's very hard on us, and I think that's where the pressure is to refuse to buy sometime. But that's all linked. The climate change, the climate justice, the refugees are at the end, and the poverty is going to be all linked together. And I've seen people totally. Those farmers in Kampot were in tremendous distress because there is no help, there is no support for them. So their life is totally broken because of a massive drought, and that's a real impact. Just 1 hour flight away from here, and it's going to happen more and more, I think, unfortunately.
Yes, there's a reality of climate change impact, so the physical risk, physical impact of climate change. We already can see it. Maybe Roberta, what do you think companies should do? What's their role? Indeed, maybe consumer still also, but what companies should do?
Right. So, I mean, we work with many, most of the companies we work with are, generally speaking, multinational companies. So they work in different markets. They respond to the demands of different consumers. They do have like very complicated and very widespread supply chains. And I don't know. Probably one company buying pepper from Cambodia as well, maybe one of these companies like that need to think through its purchasing practices, need to think through its strategy when it's about buying certain products from certain markets versus others, supply chain resilience, so like ensuring that they can, deliver that product to their consumer if there is demand, and if their supply chain is impacted by climate, they are also impacted on their bottom line. So because they cannot source, they cannot rely on these sources. So it's very complex, it's very difficult. But the first thing that company I think should think through is first and foremost their purchasing practices. Many companies are working with their suppliers in terms of scrutinizing labor practices in their supply chain, conducting audits on suppliers, providing training, support to their suppliers to improve their practices. Sometimes, however, there is a missing link when it comes to what I, as a buyer, am incentivizing in terms of practices in my supply chain. One thing is requiring to, have good standards in terms of occupational health and safety, not to have overtime, adequate wages, and so on and so forth. But, most of the times the situation is, in terms of the buying practices, is literally, as a buyer, I am incentivizing these practices because of very short time frame when it comes to requiring certain products to be delivered to reach consumers at the end of the chain. And there's so many other purchasing practices that are potentially leading to some of these practices. And I think in this case it's really like a question of incentives and what incentives are given within the organizations to procurement, to people that are actually working and sourcing those goods, because sometimes incentives are simply misaligned. There are many companies that have, very skilled individuals working on engaging with suppliers, supporting suppliers on their labor practices, conducting audits, assessments, training, and so on and so forth. But if at the end of the story, the purchasing practices are not aligned with the principles that the companies is trying to push in the supply chain, then, there is no way it can work. I think it's something that it needs to be well thought through within the companies to think about. One thing is a stick, but the other thing should also be the carrot, and making sure that when I set up certain requirements to my suppliers, those are aligned with what the suppliers can achieve. And also, if a supplier is performing well in their social sustainability or environmental sustainability, whatever that is, there are rewards and incentives for suppliers to help them sustain their business. Because otherwise, it's just like, you will lose, your suppliers along the way. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
Because I went on a tangent. But I think that's a very important thing to say. And I think the other thing is like unsilo, because many companies are working on one hand on their social compliance with their suppliers. On the other end, a completely different department maybe is working on environmental issues with suppliers, environmental efficiency, decrease of emissions to help support their goals on scope 3, for example. But these people are not talking to each other. And this is also part of the problem, because when we talk about climate justice, it's about, breaking the silos and taking into consideration that whatever goal I have in terms of net zero, in terms of climate goals, those will need to be met with, with the workers that are involved. Those need to be met with the communities that are relying on certain resources that may not exist anymore, because we are trying to transition. So I think that's another thing that I think it's important to consider, like unsilo. I think for me is very important for what we want to achieve.
Thank you. I think that's you touch an important point about sustainability. It's supposed to be integrated, right? Not itself be another silo in the company. Thank you. Audrey, what's your take on all this?
I will keep it short. There are two keywords from your question that I picked up. One is decarbonization and the other one is social. I feel like a lot of people, when they think about sustainability, they think it's an environmental thing. And so many people are focused on decarbonization because that is the thing that is most talked about. Like people talk about reducing carbon footprint, how can you choose a better energy supplier. It's all about carbon, but the social aspect is also a part of sustainability because ESG, right? So environmental, social, and governance. And why social is part of sustainability, I'm so glad the two of you are here. Because businesses rely on people to work, and your business also has impact on people. So taking the decarbonization topic as an example, if you want to switch to like solar energy and you build a solar farm, for example, it's a good project for energy, for decarbonization, but if it involves having to relocate a group of villagers and you have to displace them to build your solar farm, that's not sustainable at all, you know? So there are many different parts that make up this sustainability conversation, and carbon is just one of them. And it's also, to leave this question, I would say it's not just about doing less harm, but also doing more good in your solutions.
Thank you, beautiful set. I think we can close already. I know time goes very, very fast. So we can close this session with one question for you. Right? Could each one of you give one concrete action for businesses and one for consumers on how each one of them can proactively influence sustainability and climate justice? It can be something very small or something big, anything, one kind of like one key takeaway from you. Who would like to start?
I'm going to try to be short, but maybe 2 words to remember. I think we're all very familiar with the reduce, reuse, recycle. I have 2 R words. One is going to be for the business, and it's rethink. I think we all, in all our departments, every employee, every managers, every team manager, directors, we need to rethink what we do. If you're in IT, do we need new laptop or can we buy second hands? If you're in HR, what is it that we can do to the benefits to encourage carpooling and public transport? If we're in marketing, do we need to give goodies to all our clients who come to a conference, those plastic stuff that are totally useless, but we are still giving thousands of tons every year. So rethink for the business, looking at KPIs, for everyone around specific topics you want to address. And the other R words for the consumer, I think I mentioned it earlier, a spoiler, refuse. I think we have everything we do or we don't do, everything we buy or we don't buy is a political message. And I think we really have, as consumers and individuals, we have a massive power here. I have nothing against the brand, but I'm going to mention one, sorry. Starbucks, okay? For those who know, who have read a bit, the CEO of Starbucks is a brand new CEO, just got a $50 million package to move from another company, join Starbucks, and he refused to relocate his family, okay? So this guy, this CEO, is flying every day with a private jet to go to work, 1,600 kilometers every day, okay? How can Starbucks sustainability program can, as a consumer, how can I trust that if the CEO and the board members and the shareholders who approved it? I think there is no surprise here. We approved the fact that this gentleman can fly every day 1,600 kilometers with the most polluting equipment on the planet, a private jet. To me, as a consumer, Starbucks is over. I don't set a foot in Starbucks anymore. That's my power. If all of us, everybody is aware of the story and we stop going to Starbucks and the sales decline, the guy is either out of job or they make sure that he relocates like every other employee will do closer to work. And that's, I think, as a consumer, the power that we have, again, when we buy or we don't buy. So refuse.
Thank you. Wow. Rethink and refuse. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Okay, I'm just going to jump in. I love that you mentioned the Starbucks. When you say Starbucks, I'm like, I know, the private jet.
He's going to say it.
Yes. So he's taking it like we are taking a bus. To me, to link it back to communications and how a brand puts forward its messaging, this is what leads mistrust, because what you're doing and what you're saying doesn't match. And it also matters like who you hire, the people, the culture, and how you practice what your brand's values are. They all have to align. If not, like, consumers are not stupid, like we can tell. Okay, but my 2 tips for businesses and consumers. For businesses, I would say start now, because the longer you delay, the bigger the problems are going to be. And I'm not saying this as a scare tactic, but the climate is changing, resources are being used up, regulation is coming. So the slower you take action, the more at risk you are. But with risk also comes opportunities. And if you don't know what to do, there are consultancies available. I mean, there are 2 of us here. We are both sustainability consultants with different skill sets. And if we, can help, just come talk to us. And then for consumers, I am very much inclined to not call them consumers, but like individuals or citizens, because we have to do more than consume. We have to participate in society. We have to give feedback to the governments, to businesses, and to play a more active role in being alive, rather than just taking the options that are made available to us. So I would say start being active.
Thank you. We should have changed the title of this session then. Businesses and individuals. Okay, thank you. Roberta?
I don't know if I can be that succinct. Definitely not 2 words, but maybe I can play with 4. So I think there are 2 sides, the company and the citizen. Individuals, citizens, whatever. Social actors, I mean, you can call them whatever you want. So I think, and it's really like mirroring the 2 roles. So, I mean, for companies, be transparent. Again, the greenwashing, of course, is always there, but like transparency is very important because that helps consumers or social actors or individuals to be aware, because that's very important for people to be aware and conscious about what's behind what they're buying. And then once they know, well, be human. Once you know what you're paying for, then should you still buy that product because it's cheap? Maybe it's about, again, consuming less, paying maybe a little bit more for one product instead of 3, 4, 5. And because you are aware and because you are human and know what's behind. So I think that's my conclusion, that kind of less
Thank you.
succinct.
Yes, we all have responsibility in this, either in our role as citizen, as a role as working in a company, either as a role working in the government. So maybe we can rethink the way we interact, the way we consume, the way we work.
And as parent, that's not an easy one.
That's a tricky one, yes. Well, thank you all. Very, very interesting discussion. I hope you enjoyed it too. We do have some time left for some questions. Have we received any questions? We did. That's great. Okay, so we have some questions from the audience, but also if anyone would like to ask, okay, great, we have a list already. Okay, first question. What are your thoughts on degrowth as a response to achieving true sustainability? Is this at odds with businesses and consumers? We have a lot of questions, so just to let you know, let's keep it short. Okay.
I'm going to give it a try. I think the real solution is degrowth. That's for sure. Based on where we are and where we are going, degrowth is going to be needed. Or the problem is that word is so scary with the people who have the power today, whether they are political, financial, economical power. The word of degrowth is something that for them is not just conceivable. So I think if we use the word degrowth, there's going to be so massive walls against us that is going to be very, very hard way. And maybe instead of going into a degrowth, there might be other steps and a social growth, a sustainable growth. There might be other ways to look at it. I think that word is just too scary for the big guys, and we're going to have to play around that. And refusing is one way of doing the degrowth. So each of us can kind of degrow in our own turf and in our own company. But the reality is the current system is based on growth, and stopping that, I think, is going to be too hard of a fight, and we might be able to win more battles if we use a different type of growth than the one that is just used today.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm also a supporter of degrowth. I think it's scary because it signifies like loss of businesses, loss of jobs and all that. But if you think about it, there is no practical way for us to keep growing forever. Like resources are depleting, we are using it faster than it can be replenished. So it has to shrink, and it is not a matter of like the lack, or it's not a production issue, but it's more of a distribution issue. because some people have a lot more and some people have nothing. So it's not about, you know, we have to produce less and we have less. It is a redistribution issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so the one thing that I was just thinking through, so we actually did a workshop at the beginning of this year. We facilitated a workshop on growth because it's part of the work that we do with our members is to facilitate workshops and events. I think reminding myself of when we were preparing for that, I still remember internal discussions about the use of that word in this side of the world. Should we use degrowth? Should we be like using these terms also in Asia? Because we know that there are implications and potential pushbacks in terms of, you know, but where does equality comes, you know, in the equation? There are many countries that are struggling, you know, with poverty levels, and what does it mean to say degrowth to these countries when they have yet to achieve, they have yet to be able to sustain their population and the livelihood of their population. So I think I just wanted to add that because, you know, it's a very heated debate, and I think, you know, there are different perspectives from different countries, and I think it's still controversial, despite what we think personally about what should happen. Yeah, so, I mean, the other thing that I was thinking, I think there are other aspects of it that there are maybe easier way easier way to play with the term in a way. If you think about, again, decarbonization efforts, a lot of that needs to go into investment in renewables, for instance. Investment into clean technologies. Nowadays, there is a lot of critics from civil society organizations to companies that are investing in renewable energy, not only for their, like you mentioned, the impacts on local communities when, you know, these projects are developed, that, you know, there are all things associated to that. The other aspects that are very relevant and is really, really linked with the technologies themselves and to the actual product of renewable energy, like solar panels or wind farms, is the raw materials that go into these technologies. Nickel is one example, copper. Those raw materials are, you know, there is like a very increased growth of extractions of these materials, and it just keeps on going on, you know, the usual model of you know, basically digging a hole, extractive, and there is currently limited effort or limited at-scale solutions for instead investing in circular economy also for these very needed investments. So I think this is another kind of degrowth consideration. So we need to grow in terms of climate solutions. We need to grow in terms of renewable energy investments. But how can we do that in a way that is not yet again reinforcing that fossil fuel system that we are digging again the whole impacting local communities, relying on workers that are paid very low, and creating this ever continuing loop of traditional models in a way.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. Interesting views. Degrowth, it's an interesting topic, and it's quite hard to address. We have a question for Sam. Earlier you said that the company could go after as many certifications as possible to prove they're doing it right. But is it scalable for SMEs?
I did not say that.
Okay.
I said as a consumer, if you can see a packaging with many certifications, then eventually that's better than a packaging that has nothing. I think it's going to depend on what you want to achieve. What is your market? What is your product? What is your consumers? Where do you get your supply from? And I think that's where you want to look at where does it make the most sense for me in my SME, Should it be an organic product? Should I focus on sustainable fair trade certification? If I'm using a specific type of packaging, should I be looking at a packaging that has, so for example, FSC, which prove that there is no deforestation behind that packaging, especially if it's paper type of packaging. So again, there is not one size fits all. I think it will depend, and that goes back to your point at the very beginning, is how do you want to make sure that that certification align with your mission and your values, and that your product or the service that you sell is in line with this. And once you're clear with that, I'm sure you will find one certification that meets that specific requirement. Going after everything, even the big MNCs are not doing it. I tell you, it's complex, it's massive, but you will need to pick what is right for you as an SME. And if you're committed as a leader or as a manager, the cost is not that expensive, to be frank. It's a matter of commitment. The savings you're going to make for other area can be invested in that specific certification scenario to allow you to get additional market share, find new buyers, new markets where that certification is going to be important and where you're going to be able to charge a premium because you have that certification that other competitors don't have. So that's also a way to differentiate yourself and bring potentially an additional price value or cost value into your product.
Thank you. I think that answers very well the question.
Can I actually jump in?
Sure.
Because I understand where this person is coming from. I serve SMEs because I'm a one-woman show, and I don't work with big corporations on sustainability strategies and all that. So I get this question a lot from SMEs to say like, oh, should I go for B Corp or should I go for a certain certification? And my question to them is always, why? What is your intention of getting this certification? Like, is it just so you have a symbol to put on your product, on your website? Are your investors interested? Or what is the core reason of you wanting to do it? And if they don't have a clear why, I never encourage them to do it. I'm so sorry.
Absolutely, we do the same. It's not a game. It's such a massive investment as a company, because it's not the price of the certification, it's what you're going to put in place to achieve that certification and be work differently, source differently, sell differently. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
If they don't have a clear why, you don't go there. It's not greenwashing.
It is a matter of cost also. It's a matter of resources, like, because as an SME, you can have maybe 50 people in your team. Like, who has the time to do all this and then to do the work that you have to do on a daily basis? Like, is it worth it, is the consideration. So you have to have a really strong why. If not, I think it is much more worthwhile to show or prove how, and show your values through your product, the way you're marketing, the way you behave, the way you show up in the industry and to your consumers. Like, that's a lot more important. It might take longer, but it's a lot more authentic.
And you can still do the B-Lab assessment without going for the certification. You can use for internal assessment to see what's your performance without, you can see if you're ready or not. Thank you. I think we have at least a question from the audience. If someone could share the microphone. We have a lot of questions.
Hi, thank you. Yes. Sorry, I'll try to be quick. Yeah, so the reality is profit growth models, cost management, they all lead to a lot of supply chain data sanitization decisions. So my question is, how do you think organizations can reconcile the data sanitization portion of it with the ESG transparency that's now needed for audit and compliance? Because a lot of decision making in organizations, unfortunately, are driven by profit models. And the data that's collected for audit and toll booths for certification is usually driven by data sanitization. I'm just curious to hear the thoughts, because like what Roberta had said, it's a big rabbit hole. You can't really tell, the chicken or the egg and where it starts and who.
Can you elaborate a bit on data sanitization? What do you mean?
Okay, so for example, because of the UN audit and compliance regulation now for listed companies, and then with mid-market size companies going forward, right, from next year. A lot of companies are struggling to continue competing in their own go-to-market strategy, where people still buy your products or services, to then qualify for green loans or put a logo or 10 logos on your packaging, etc., you need to basically have the audit be approved. And part of that, there is a lot of data sanitization, as in embellishment, etc. Right? It's like even with small businesses, some I know that I've heard they want to go to Indonesia, buy up plots of land from some of these farmers, turn it into, carbon deforestation businesses where they sell the credits off, not just to airlines, etc. I mean, it's all part of business economy. It's not really promoting sustainability per se, right? They're finding, maybe a loophole sounds terrible, but they're finding a space, whether it's supply chain or the fact that there's an unmet demand, etc., just to play in that space. So I'm just curious, just to hear the thought. I mean, break it down however you want, but it's a real issue. I mean, companies are basically even driven by ESG agendas based on how analyst relations go, how it's being reported. I'm not sure, just like to Sam's example, that the CEO of Starbucks is passionate about fair trade and coffee fair trade and stuff like that. I mean, it's all a bit marketing, right, Audrey? So yeah, thank you.
Well, it's a mix. I will start first. We have only 1 minute after, and just before me. So it's a mix of many things, right? ESG analysts, assurance, audit. We cannot just put them all in the same bucket, but they are connected to communication and reporting. But I know, Roberta, from your point of view, maybe if you, maybe from the audit perspective, to reassure us that you cannot just claim whatever you want. So maybe that's the positive part.
Yeah, I don't know if I can offer that. So I think for me, I mean, I would just think about it more like, at least they're doing something. That's the first thing I would say, because if you would be surprised to know that, I mean, there are still many companies that think that supplier engagement equals having a supplier code of conduct, and that's it. And they don't do any engagement, really. They don't do any audits. They don't do any assessments on their suppliers. They don't actually engage with their suppliers, other than maybe, when you're lucky, having a clause in a contract that says that I'm expecting you to abide by this principle as written in this code of conduct, but that they don't check on it. So I think, again, for me, it's at least they're doing something. So that's my first reaction to it. Then I know that on, for instance, and it's not necessarily my field, carbon credits and, carbon offsetting and those type of instruments. I know that there are standardization bodies like SBTi or others that are thinking through and trying to push company to not just use these tools as a way to kind of clean up or to meet their goals, because it should be first and foremost like a decarbonization effort, not just like a patchwork of, additional ways to do it that at the end of the story, they don't necessarily help. They don't change the business model. But yeah, so, I mean, that's as far as I can go on carbon credits and carbon offsets. But for me, it's, again, at least they're doing something, especially when it comes to engaging suppliers and to try to work with suppliers to improve. Regulation is also helping there, at least regulation, you see there is this DDD, the another alphabet soup, the due diligence directive in Europe that is pushing through some of these practices, and one day it will be, it will be seen more and more also in this region, because, either maybe you're not exposed to European markets directly, but your buyers are, and they will expect you to do something, and they will expect you to do something with your suppliers. So it's kind of a cascading effect in a way that we hope will lead to some change. Then there was the regional conference on business and human rights in Bangkok at the end of September. And I think sometimes as sustainability consultants or sustainability professionals, live in our own kind of, I don't know, rainbow and flower world in a way, thinking that, you know, everyone is on the same page with us, everyone has good intentions, everyone, you know, these very good laws that we think is very good will have, you know, will lead to a change. But then I think there are so many implementation considerations, so many obstacles along the way, and so many also equality considerations to consider, because ultimately it's like, again, passing on the expectations to others. And these others may not have the same resources, the same tools and capacity to manage these issues the way you would like. And in a context that may not necessarily be that positive or that, I don't know, that have like a rule of law or, you know, the same same types of standards and same types of supporting regulation and legislation that can support them to meet these expectations. So yeah, sorry, too many different things, and time is up. Thank you. We should end.
Thank you so much. No, very, very interesting. There are like a lot of things to discuss, and I'm really happy to see so many questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go through all of them. Do we still have time for a break after the next session or not? How much?
Yes. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes to address the questions directly to them if you want during the break. If not, I will see you just after. And actually, I'm going to be the speaker for the next session, so familiar face. Thank you so much, and see you in 5 minutes.